All who come to this happy podcast, welcome. This is This Happy Place, a Disney podcast, and welcome to the series where I will be talking about all 63 films to come from the Walt Disney Animation Studio. We are already on the 9th film, which means it's time to talk about Fun and Fancy Free. Fun and Fancy Free is another movie that comes in this packaged film era. If you want to hear more about the unofficial eras of Disney animation, you can go check out one of my episodes about that. But I don't think people realize how many of Disney's films, especially those from early on, came from an already existing story. A majority of Disney's early films are technically not original stories. That may sound as a surprise to some of you, but let's take a look back and think about it a little bit longer. Disney did not come up with the original story of Snow White, Pinocchio, Dumbo, or even Bambi. But what they did do was take the bones of that story and make it their own. So these Disney classics to some appear as the first iteration of these stories. Walt always was on the lookout for great stories and places for inspiration, and that is no different with Fun and Fancy Free. Fun and Fancy Free is still considered a packaged film, but as opposed to the others that have come before it, this one is only made up of 2 shorts, rather than anywhere from like 6 to 10 shorts. It has, like I said, 2 shorts. One of them is inspired by Jack and the Beanstalk. Adapting the story of Jack and the Beanstalk isn't actually a new idea for Walt. The first time Walt made a Jack and the Beanstalk cartoon is all the way back in 1922 when he was working at Laugh-O-Gram Studios. While he was there, the studio made a silent cartoon based off Jack and the Beanstalk. However, right now, no prints have been found of this original cartoon, but the character of Jack from that short went on to be in other shorts. In 1933, shortly after Mickey Mouse was created, Disney created a short called Giantland, which featured Mickey Mouse as the star. This is an altered version of Jack and the Beanstalk, but it's not a direct retelling. So when it came to make another feature towards the end of the war, Walt thought of Jack and the Beanstalk, but making Mickey the main character. While developing this idea, he also thought it would be fun to throw in Donald and Goofy. This would be the first time they would all be appearing in a feature film together. This is also the last time Walt would regularly provide the voice for Mickey Mouse. Yes, for those of you who don't know, Walt was the original voice actor of Mickey Mouse. The other short in this movie is called Bongo. Bongo originated by being a comic written by a magazine or for a magazine by an author named Sinclair Lewis. Walt brought this to his team, and most of, if not all of them, hated this idea. Bongo was a circus bear, and since the circus plays a key part in this story, to please Walt, it was originally going to be a sequel to Dumbo, with some of the same characters making a reappearance. That's about all the history for these 2 films. Like I mentioned in my last episode, it's just going to be natural that as I go on, some movies may not have as much intriguing history behind them as others. And this is one of those movies. So let's get into my review. This movie kind of opens up with a nice little surprise, especially for me. The first character we see in this movie is... I was doing a drum roll in my head, but I realized you wouldn't hear that. The first character you see in this movie is Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy Cricket is one of my favorite Disney characters, so it was a pleasant surprise seeing him kind of being the narrator of this movie. The first half of this movie of Fun and Fancy Free is with that short, Bongo. In this movie, the short is set up as Jiminy Cricket. As I said, he's kind of the narrator that bridges the gaps between the 2 shorts. He's in this house and he comes across a sad teddy bear and a sad baby doll. To cheer them up, he puts a record on the record player, and the record he chooses is Bongo. This record is almost like a singing narrative by a narrator by Dinah Shore, who I may be embarrassed to admit this, I've never heard of before this movie. It was way before my time, but apparently she was a pretty big star back in the day. So the film that we're actually seeing is like a visual representation of the story that's being told on this record player. I hope that makes sense. Bongo is a circus bear, and like I mentioned before, this was almost to be worked into a Dumbo type sequel. So at the beginning, you can see some similarities for sure. Bongo is a famous circus bear. His specialty is riding a unicycle on a tightrope while he does a bunch of cool tricks that are pretty standard fare for a circus cartoon. Things like juggling on the unicycle while riding the tightrope, riding the unicycle on his head while he's juggling a bunch of stuff with his feet, and a bunch of other fun stuff like that. And when you first see Bongo, he is super happy performing all of these tricks. But then you realize that he's just getting sick of this and he just wants out. This is kind of shown with the visual as Bongo is sitting in the caboose of the circus train. It's the night of the full moon, and the full moon casts shadows through the bars on the side of the caboose, making it look like Bongo is wearing jail stripes. This is very similar to a shot in Dumbo, and I can only help but wonder if they were inspired by that idea. While on the train to the next circus stop, Bongo breaks free of the train and is excited to live in the woods. While he is living in the woods, he realizes that living in the woods might be a little bit more difficult than he thinks, and he slowly gets discouraged. He's a bear who can't climb a tree. He's a bear who can't find anything to eat. He's a bear that even has a hard time sleeping. But just in the nick of time, right when Bongo's spirits were the lowest, he runs into this bear and he develops a crush for her, and it kind of gives him a reason to start living, I guess. This bear also likes Bongo in return, and this relationship starts to develop, and it continues on with a song. The song, as with everything said in this short, is sung by Dinah Shore, and it's a pretty forgettable song. She has a great voice, don't get me wrong, but I just don't feel like the song was anything noteworthy or special. I can't even remember the tune of it. The song ends with the two bears being surrounded by a bigger colony of bears that it seems Luella, which is the name of this female bear that Bongo has a crush on, is a part of. It's at this time when the antagonistic bear comes storming in. I would tell you this bear's name, but it's like Lumpjaw. It's a really weird name, but it's only mentioned once, so I wouldn't blame you if you forget the name if you watch this movie. It's a very forgettable name. But this is a big bear who is also seeking Luella's attention. When he notices that Luella is liking Bongo more than him, he starts to get upset, and Luella recognizes this. What she does next is pretty unexpected, as she slaps Bongo across the face, and then she slaps Bongo again. Bongo gets really confused and gets really sad because he felt like he was starting to develop something serious with Luella. So when Luella goes to slap Bongo again, Bongo ducks and she accidentally slaps Lumpjaw instead. Bongo rides away on his unicycle in a saddened state, but this thing with slapping may seem kind of weird, but it's actually not. It's actually quite significant for the story. It's all explained in a song called "A Bear Likes to Say It with a Slap." Yes, you heard me right. It's "A Bear Says It with a Slap." The song explains how other animals say "I love you" to each other. For example, a bird says "I love you" with a twitter, a dog says it with a yap, a pigeon says it with a coo. But bears are special because when they are in love with another bear, they show that love by slapping the other bear. That is why it is a big deal that Luella accidentally slaps Lumpjaw while trying to slap Bongo. She accidentally declared her love for Lumpjaw. This song is weird, but at the same time enjoyable and humorous. It contradicts what we already know about telling someone I love you and makes a pretty funny situation. The lyrics are clever, the tune is catchy, and I felt strongly that if this movie was more popular, the melody would be one that everyone would know. It would definitely be a trending TikTok sound. If not for how catchy it is, but for how comedic and shocking the lyrics are. But while out in the woods, Bongo somehow comes to the realization that a slap means "I love you" in bear language. So he rushes back to Luella to try and slap her back, but Lumpjaw gets in the way. This actually leads to a pretty good length climactic fight/chase/action scene between the two bears. It follows them all throughout the forest. Bongo uses his unicycle as a weapon and his expertise as a boxer. Yes, him being a boxer is something that is actually brought up at the beginning of the movie. but as a boxer, he eventually starts to wear down Lumpjaw. The fight gets to a place where they are hanging onto a log while they are about to go over a waterfall. Bongo survives, but Lumpjaw apparently dies, he falls, and that is that. I really like the story of this short and all of the visuals, characters, the score, but I think the biggest problem I have with this short is it's very hard to make a short where the whole thing is done by narration rather than the characters talking themselves. Like I said, this short is presented in a way that it is a narration of something, so I get why we never hear the characters talk, but I think that serves as a detriment rather than a useful storytelling tool for this part of the movie. I just was never able to get as attached to the characters as I could have been. Are there effective movies or shorts where the characters don't talk? Of course. It just didn't work for me in this. There are long stints of this short where there is no narration, and that almost goes against the whole premise of we're listening to a record, because if you're actually listening to this record, there's a whole section, especially during the fight scene at the end, where you wouldn't have any idea of what's going on. So I don't feel like they fully committed to that idea of this being a visualization of the record that is being played. I feel like you either have to go full into it or not do any at all. I feel like I would have liked this portion of the movie better if it was all narration or no narration. Disney has made great stuff with no narration, and I think this would have been another great opportunity to be really expressive with music. As far as the animation style goes, you can tell that things are picking up from even the past movie, which was Make Mine Music. It still doesn't look as good as it could have been with all the circumstances surrounding it, especially the war that had recently ended at this point, but the colors were surprisingly bright, surprisingly vibrant, and the design of the characters was really cute and really charming. Bongo is a very cute bear who is animated perfectly for the character that he was. A bear of many talents who can beat up anyone bigger than him, who can outsmart people, and who's also very talented on a unicycle. I honestly wish that Bongo had become a bigger character in the Disney zeitgeist, because I totally would buy merch of Bongo. If I went to Disneyland or any Disney park and they had a Bongo t-shirt or hoodie, pin or mug, all of the above, I would buy that so quickly. As I've been doing this series, I've been keeping track of some of my favorite Disney characters so far. Characters on that list are Jiminy Cricket, the Dwarfs, Thumper, and I do feel like I have to add Bongo to that list. So, to summarize this briefly, I love the story. Some songs didn't work. Some songs absolutely slapped. Yes, that is a pun intended with the feature song of this movie. I just wasn't a big fan of how they chose to tell this story, but it was really fun to watch. I wasn't dreading myself. I never looked at my phone to see how much time was left, and I think if people go back and watch this movie, I really do feel like they would feel similar to me. I think kids would have a blast watching Bongo in this movie because he's a silly bear who does silly things, and I was legitimately surprised at how much I enjoyed this part of the movie. Like I said, most of these packaged movies, there is a moment in between segments that almost acts as a bridge between the two parts. The moment that acts as a bridge in Fun and Fancy Free is Jiminy Cricket is in this house where he saw the sad baby doll and the sad teddy bear, and he finds an invitation that there is a mini house party happening across the street, and he decides to go join and see what's going on. This house party there's just two people there, a man and a girl, and two ventriloquist dummies. I might have missed it, but I don't believe that the relationship between the man and the girl is emphasized or brought up at all, but I think the best we could tell or infer is that they're just good neighbors and good friends. I'm also not aware of who this guy is. I believe he is a famous comedian, but way before my time, and I've never heard of him before, but apparently he was known for being a ventriloquist. This is kind of odd, as there really isn't any purpose of having the ventriloquist dummies at all. The dummies are used there as somewhat comic relief, as the man uses them to help introduce us to the next short film in the form of him telling this girl this story of Jack and the Beanstalk. This story is done through narration once again by this man, but the only difference is we do have characters that talk. There aren't as many breaks with no narration. The one big problem, however, I do have with the narrator of this story is that since this is the story of Mickey and Jack and the Beanstalk being told to a little girl at the party, this man, who is also, like I said, a ventriloquist master, helps, I don't know what other a ventriloquist professional, I have no idea what you call them, but he uses his ventriloquist dummies to help tell the story. These ventriloquist dummies help tell the story in one of two ways. The first way is you're still in the story and you see the animation and they just make one-liner comments. These comments are made to be funny, and I got to admit the first couple I kind of chuckled, but as it went on, they kind of got tiring. They took me out of the movie, and I kind of wish they would stop because I really liked what I was seeing with Mickey and Donald and Goofy. The other way the ventriloquist dummies were used to help tell the story was we were actually taken out of the animation and we saw a couple of scenes back at the house party, which is of course in live action. I really wish they didn't do this. They had something going really strong with this Mickey adventure, and this just put a speed bump in every flow the story had. But this is a great short made by Disney. I think this goes to prove how great of the characters the core 5 are in this case. I guess in this one it's only 3, Mickey, Goofy, and Donald. Disney really struck gold when making these characters, and I don't think it's weird to say that Mickey, Donald, and Goofy are probably some of my favorite characters Disney has ever created. I'm not including them in my previously mentioned list of famous Disney or my favorite Disney characters, because these characters also exist out of the movies. My list is mainly focusing on characters from the movies. But Disney really struck gold, and I think when people talk about their favorite Disney characters, they usually bring up classics like Cinderella, Peter Pan, Genie, Simba, Elsa, but there's a ton of other Disney characters from those nostalgic Disney movies that are important to all of us. But I don't often hear people say their favorite Disney characters are their classics like Mickey, Goofy, Donald, Pluto, Minnie. And I think that's maybe because their perception of Mickey mostly comes from the theme parks, which is understandable, but Mickey, when you take time to watch the Mickey cartoons, the Mickey and Friends cartoons, you'll understand why Mickey became so popular in the first place. Their chemistry between the 3 of them is so fun, so imaginative, you just can't help but love watching these friends spend time together. But this story is simply a retelling of the classic Jack and the Beanstalk. Of course, it is shortened up, some things are cut out, but all the essentials are still there. It opens up in this valley called Happy Valley that is very green, very lush with trees and flowers. And the reason why this valley is flourishing is there is this magical harp that sings to them. One day, this harp gets stolen, and the valley is quickly turned into a place that is as close to a barren landscape as you can be. Rivers are dried up. Crops have turned to dust, and our trio is starving, so much so that Donald is tired of rationing, and in a classic Donald rage fit, he eats plates and goes to kill the pet cow that they have. Goofy and Mickey convince him that they should sell the cow, so Mickey goes to do so, but instead he gets magic beans. We all know this story. One thing leads to another, and a magic beanstalk grows in their house. There's this scene of the stalk growing in their house that provides us with some really entertaining visual gags. The joke here is the beanstalk is growing while everyone is asleep. So as the stalk is growing, their beds are slipping in the stems of the stalk, almost acting like as a slide. They fall out of their beds as the stalk acts as one big slide, and they fall off and then gracefully fall back onto it. Eventually, it stops growing and they end up at the giant's castle. They originally don't know what to expect, so they go exploring. To their delight, they find a great amount of food on the giant's table. They are starving, so they are so happy to see this food. They start eating everything in sight. Then they notice that the harp is there in the castle. So the last little bit of this short is essentially kind of like a fun heist movie with them trying to rescue the harp. I am not too familiar with other iterations of Jack and the Beanstalk. I mean, I know the basics, so I'm not sure how the exact process of events happen or how the giant is characterized. But in this movie, I really like the choice they made to make the giant not stupid, but at the same time, he's also not the sharpest crayon in the box. At first, you think the trio won't have any problem rescuing the harp, but then the giant ups his game and actually provides a nice challenge. There is this part where Goofy and Donald find themselves locked in a mini kind of jewelry box, and Mickey has to get the key from the giant's pocket. There is a really effective tension going on, and the music fits it so well. But it's that constant shift of feeling like the giant isn't smart enough to get them to, oh no, he actually can, that makes this a very entertaining watch. Eventually, they rescue the harp, and just like the old story, they cut down the beanstalk as the giant is coming down it, and the giant presumably dies. I say that because as the animation part of this is getting wrapped up, they cut back to the party, and there is this joke that doesn't land really, where one of the dummies is really upset that the giant dies. Then he gets comforted by the man that it's only a figment of his imagination and the giant is not a real giant. This sets up probably the biggest gag and shock of the movie, where the giant, in a live-action animation hybrid type thing, rips off the roof of the house while looking for Mickey. This is a great blend of animation and live action. Which makes me remember, this is a slight sidetrack, but one of the highlights during the Mickey and the Beanstalk segment is when it cuts to the live action party, there are fun combinations of animation and live action with Jiminy Cricket, like eating a piece of cake or getting a drink, sucking it through a straw. And I love how they blend animation and live action. And I can only help but imagine that this kind of helped pave the way for things like Mary Poppins. But getting back to the point, the giant puts the roof back on the house and then walks around Hollywood while looking for Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Goofy. If any of you have been to the Magic Kingdom in Orlando and have visited the shop Sir Mickey's, which is kind of just like a souvenir shop, there's a fun little Easter egg where you can see this giant peeking through the roof. Overall, Fun and Fancy Free is a really enjoyable watch. It could be more enjoyable if each section were to fix its greatest flaw. For Bongo, it's the poor use of narration, and for Mickey and the Beanstalk, it's the constant interruption of the live-action segments and the one-liners from the ventriloquist dummies that really hold it back. So, the question is, in my Disney rankings, out of the 9 movies that I have reviewed so far, where does Fun and Fancy Free take place? Well, it's the 4th. It's my 4th favorite. So that puts it right below Pinocchio, but right above the Three Caballeros. Fun and Fancy Free, I just love how this was a much more streamlined movie than like Three Caballeros and Saludos Amigos, partly because it was only 2 shorts as opposed to like 6 to 10. I think that really makes it so Fun and Fancy Free had that going for it, where there wasn't as much like almost like chasing or catching up with the multiple shorts in this movie since there was only 2. And the shorts were pretty enjoyable. Like I said, Bongo is quickly one of my new favorite Disney characters, and you just have to love watching anything Mickey or his friends are in. Thank you for listening to this episode of This Happy Place, a Disney podcast. And remember, there is a great, big, beautiful tomorrow shining at the end of every day.